So I've been in Montgomery County for about 2 years now, and pulled up, my wife and I with our whole family, to come here because as we were looking around thinking about another place to live, looking around Montgomery County, it seemed to us to be a place where people were working on what's possible. And being here now for a couple of years, we see that all over our county, but we also see a lot of need. There's tremendous work that we've done as a county. We've been responsive in many ways relative to other places, but I still think that there's more that we could do.
From my perspective, the leadership of Montgomery County gets it. The leadership of Montgomery County recognizes the change in demographics, recognizes that now we are a majority minority, and senior management does too. From my perspective, those thoughts and desires have yet to trickle down into the frontline staff. And therefore, still today, we have a system in Montgomery County for winners and losers. Those members of, particularly the Latino community, who can adapt and take advantage of the wonderful services that Montgomery County does have, then those can succeed. But those who don't adapt, then those become losers. In many cases, members of the Latino population and other populations as well do not know that those services exist. And then what happens is, by chance, either they get to nonprofits like ours, who are doing a tremendous job for Montgomery County, and we can guide them through the process. But what happens when those individuals don't get to the nonprofits? No? Even if we were to do 100% of a fantastic job, we will not reach the entire population that need services. So I think that the county needs to do a better job as to not leaving things to chance and improving the system so that we reach those who are not part of the system yet. And one of the things that happened a lot with some of the members of the population that we have served was that some of them have had negative interactions with frontline staff that have created negative perceptions amongst other community members, and people therefore do not want to access some of the services.
One of my biggest challenges when I was an executive director of a nonprofit organization that served ethnic communities is that it wasn't just about linguistic access, it was also about cultural access as well. And through one of our programs, we work primarily with Vietnamese seniors. Everybody thinks that Asians are doing well, but there are so many pockets of Asian Americans who are not doing well. If you look at the aggregate numbers, of course, it shows that Asian Americans are doing great. But a huge segment of the population that's struggling in the county right now is the Asian American seniors. The clients that we were working with, 90% of Vietnamese seniors in the county spoke Vietnamese and Vietnamese only. And only 67% of them were linguistically isolated as well, which means that they had no other access to anyone in the household that spoke English. And so you throw in the linguistic barriers and the cultural barriers, and you lose a large segment of the population that is just isolated and no one can reach them.
Well, I'm the executive director of a partner agency with the county government, and it is a resourceful and talented, highly educated county. But as an African-American woman, I sit in my office and watch the young African-American parent bring her children and her shopping bags to the biggest family shelter in the county. And in 30 days, we're having a conversation with county personnel about where you're gonna go. As the executive, an African-American executive who's raised her family here for 30 years, I see children who come from the shelter into child welfare and juvenile justice services are now in my group home. And I see them returning back homeless at 21 to 23, 24 years of age. And now we get a phone call every week from someone in the county saying, can you give housing, transitional housing for a young person who grew up in our system of care? I'll be candid with you. One of the challenges facing us is the disproportionality issue for African Americans. Many of the new Americans are actually doing better than some of the African Americans. And we go back to the history of slavery in this county and in this country. And I'm looking at disproportionality in Clarksburg Jail and juvenile justice, homeless shelters, child welfare. What's up with that? And when are we going to have the strategic conversation? We're not just a vendor or a nonprofit agency that must compete with procurement rules. We are really on the ground with community leaders on our boards governing our assessment of human need. We've got to find a more creative way to marry the diversity in Montgomery County's government with the diversity on these boards and in our staff and in our volunteer community, because we've got to do something innovative and out of the box. And I think it's time for that conversation and a different form of dialogue.
Yeah, I agree with you. Because I think the infrastructure is here. When you compare Montgomery, and I'm not want to be an apologist right now for Montgomery County, but I've lived in other places. And when you compare what we're doing here to other places, there's a lot of good stuff that's happening. There is a value around inclusion and diversity. I think we need to have some conversations about, some deeper conversations though, about race and class and privilege and power and how that diversity works for everyone. But Doc, one thing you said was about the strategic conversations that really strikes something for me. Our county has, I think, the infrastructure and the scaffolding to go out and listen to what's happening in community. The county executive has its public and budget forums. The county council moves around the county and they invite folks to come and testify at the county. There are various boards, citizens advisory boards, cultural, racial, ethnic boards, all in place to kind of be connected with community. I think there's a wonderful opportunity though for us to take that further and to bring nonprofits and government together to not just extend the invitation in a different way to invite folks into public square, to deliberate, to have the strategic conversations, but to reshape the space so that when people show up, not only do they get heard, right, but they also hear. And they can deliberate in their language, at their pace. There's childcare, there's language support, there's all the stuff that nonprofits do already in the space. And I think that a lot of the pressing challenges that we have, we can begin to address if we have deeper, more strategic conversations, ones you're talking about.
Well, I think that's kind of really urgent because I do think there's a balance. And the balance speaks to those children and families from all of our diverse communities that are bleeding versus this empowerment thing that you do well, this quality assurance thing that you're talking about where there's some evenness around how this rolls out for people. That requires a real balanced approach. And I think it's new. And I hope that perhaps we can move toward a different way of partnering in this county. I think for the benefit of all those who are struggling to remain in this county and raise their families and grow and thrive.
Me too.
I think you talk about structure and strategic conversation, and I think Montgomery County does a good job sometimes at having those strategic conversations. Sometimes they occur in forums, many times they occur one-on-one, at least that has been my experience. My issue, or the one issue that I want to put forth is, what about those individuals who are out of the system? What about those individuals who do not have a voice, who would not go to those forums? I think we as the nonprofit sector and in partnership, as you mentioned, with the county, we need to better target our resources, our workforce, the nonprofit workforce, but the county's workforce, to better first reach out to this population, create the systems so that we can understand their needs and then be able to reach their needs. But let's bring them into the system. Right now, we're not doing a good job at that, and I'm really concerned. That includes mainly many people from the new arriving populations, but I am pretty sure that it also includes African Americans and other minorities, and some white individuals too.
Well, I think what that becomes important, Diego, is there's only so many dollars, and I know this nonprofit leverages quite a lot of dollars. We pay for half of the largest homeless family shelter in the county. We raise that private dollars. So this is key, what you're talking about, so we can agree on what results are driving our investment. The nonprofit sector brings quite a bit to the table, and it should leverage and interact with the government's resources better.